What's good, YouTube? Today we're going to be talking about my predictions for the metagame in the upcoming Ribbit 1 tournament, which is being hosted over in the really big Edison Discord run by Keegan. Of course, very, very exciting event, and I'm excited for a new year of Ribbits, as I'm sure that everyone is. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to play in this one. Uh, it's kind of just a combination of factors. I'm really busy, first of all, this weekend, and I just can't make it. But then also, I don't even have a deck ready to play in this event. So, kind of probably not a good idea to enter on account of that. I will probably show up. Maybe I'll do some I don't know, commenting on. I haven't planned anything out. I'll probably be there to cheerlead my teammates, but I'm not going to be able to play in the event. I am going to be at the real life Ribbit, IRL Ribbit, in paper Ribbit in SoCal. That's in June, so that's gonna be hype. Hopefully, I'll do something, some kind of tournament report on that when I do that. But that's a long ways away. But let's just get into my sort of prediction. I think this video is gonna drop like an hour before Ribbit starts, so we're mainly just here to get my thoughts out at the last minute ahead of the beginning of the tournament. So let's jump into it. First of all, we're going to be discussing what I think we should expect. So the number one prediction that I expect to see in terms of like a stocks up deck in Ribbit 1 is the Fairy deck. Now, this is a deck that's gone up a lot in popularity recently. I think this is a deck that was always insanely strong, always powerful, always a great choice for the meta, but it just hasn't been very represented until recently. It's definitely felt like in recent weeks there's just been a ton of people picking up this deck. Now, there's three versions out there that people play. There's, of course, the traditional one with the 6 battle recruiters and then tons of back row, very sort of slow control, grindy play style. Then there's the newer builds, which are the Chaos version that I won Deck Devastators with, and then there's the like Christia Turbo one that topped at Ribbit Rulers. Now, I think the fact that this deck won Ribbit Rulers and won the most recent Deck Devastators sort of back to back has definitely pushed its popularity a lot. Another big factor, I think, is the like emergence of new innovations of this deck. In my opinion, I mentioned on my tier list, I think these decks are all relative to each other. If I had to say, I would give it to the regular Fairy deck as being the most powerful one. But I do think the newer builds are definitely like easier to pilot. They're a bit less finicky in terms of just the skill ceiling required to play them optimally. I don't think they're easy to play, but the regular Fairy build is like notoriously ridiculously difficult to pilot. Even people like God gamers like ProStorm misplay with that deck. So, I mean, if you're a median Edison player out there, you're definitely going to misplay with that deck. And I think that these new innovations have, even if they're not better, they've provided sort of more accessibility for the Fairy deck. And I think that's a good thing for the format. So, another thing that might be worth noting is that Ribbit 1 is double limb, which means that there's actually a good chance someone just enters with the Christia Turbo deck and just sacks their way to top cut. It's definitely something that could happen. It's not a bad way to approach, especially double limb tournaments of just like, I'm going to play this high ceiling deck and I'm going to hit that high ceiling and see if I can make it and just take the chance on that. So it might even be that we just see the Christia deck make it and then the other ones don't quite. But I do expect to see a lot more of this deck. I do expect to see some version of it top for sure. So that is the number one takeaway I want you to get for my predictions for this video. Some of you may recall we saw another breakout deck at Deck Devastators, which was the Machina good stuff piles that people are on. This deck, I definitely think that we are going to see this deck increase in terms of representation. Whether that converts or not is kind of going to depend on the lists and on how well they're piloted. I've made no secret about the fact that I'm not a fan of these current lists that we're seeing. I think they're just very clunky. They don't feel clean. There's lots of weird, random choices in there that I don't like. I'm not a fan of the milling. I don't think it's got a lot of synergy. I'm not a fan of the avarice. I don't think that's got a lot of synergy. I think there's just a lot of weird things going on. I think if they could be slimmed down and sort of streamlined, then they could be definitely a big contender. I think the Blackwing matchup is very strong for this deck, which is a good point for any deck in Edison format, of course. So I'm going to kind of say this one's a bit up in the air for me. It might do well, it might not. We'll just have to see. I think we're going to see a quick draw deck top. Do I have any evidence to substantiate this? No, but I think the format is honestly in a better place for quick draw than it was before. The main thing that this deck has always struggled with, all right, is that Blackwings are its worst matchup. I think pure Blackwings really struggle against the Machina deck and the Fairy deck especially, and those are both decks that we expect to see a lot more of, that people think we're going to see a lot more of, people have been seeing a lot more of. So I think the format might be just in a uniquely better place for Quick Draw than it's been before. Because, Quick Draw was like topping pretty much every event up until that period where Blackwings were just like took over for like 2 months in 2022. So hopefully we can see a Quick Draw deck come back and top, because, this deck will always be a kind of iconic staple of the format. Jeff Jones famously won the original SJC, and I think it's just a really cool deck that people really like. It's very expressive. So hopefully we can see a Quick Draw deck sneak into top cut. Someone out there can do it for me, right? For my final stocks up deck, we have a returning star of Diva Hero. This is a deck that topped, I think, Deck Devastator's True Hero topped with this, right? Yeah, he posted his whole run on his YouTube channel. Big shout out to a True Hero. He's a great Edison player, loves to play Diva Hero, which is a really cool deck. I'll link his channel in the description. You should definitely go check him out because he makes great Edison content. But this is a super cool deck. I think it's one that people have finally kind of realized, wait, this is still good, right? Like, this is just still a really good deck. I don't really know why it fell out of the meta, because I think its Blackwing matchup is also very good, and Blackwings were, of course, the best deck like 6 months ago, far and away. So I'm glad to see it back in the meta. I think it will do well, potentially. A lot of these things are kind of, there's only 8 top slots. Not everything can do well, but I think the chances of Diva Hero doing well have gone up in this tournament relative to before. I think it's definitely a deck that I've seen more recently, because there was a time, like, 8 months ago where you just weren't seeing this deck at all. And I've definitely run into it more and more in recent months. It's kind of back in the meta in a way that it wasn't before. So I expect and I hope to see Diva Hero do well. Alright, so this segment of the video is kind of just a non-prediction, which is, I think we're going to see these 3 decks, because we always see these 3 decks, and they always top. And of course, talking about pure Blackwings, Frogs, and Zombies, I think these are the consensus 3 best decks of the format, just in general. I think, these are the decks that just always top. You always expect to see them. So, as for how much of them we see, I think it kind of depends. Zombies is one where it's like, this deck usually tops because there's like just a really good zombie player, like Silchus or Beast Mode. The other 2 are much bigger metagame considerations. When I deck build, I'm just always worried about, like, I want to beat Blackwings, and I want to not just fold the Frogs. And those are like the 2 goals that I deck build with in mind. And I think that's a good way to approach the format. Blackwings, I think I said before, probably a stocks down deck, but it's just so represented, it's so popular, and it's still so good that it's gonna top somewhere, right? It just kind of has to. There's been a few events with no Blackwings in Top Cut, but it'd be pretty weird, I think, to see no Blackwings in Top Cut. Maybe just one Blackwing in Top Cut. Maybe it's that kind of event. Maybe 1 or 2. I don't know, but like, it's like 20% of the field, so it's really hard for it to not top at that point. Frogs are a deck that have definitely surged recently in terms of just the new junk synchron stuff really broke it, I think, in a new way. It pushed it over the edge and into tier 1 status for sure. It's topped pretty much every event since that version of the list came out, I think. So I expect to see it. That again, I'm not sure how much people are going to be preing for it either. Like, a couple events recently, people were just heavily preing for Frogs, but I think some of that hype might have died down, so maybe Frogs will kind of sneak through a little bit more than they have been. And then Zombies is kind of a wild card here, because it's not as represented as the other 2. Actually, it might be more represented than Frogs. I don't know exactly, but it's like more difficult to play. So it really depends. Again, if we see one of those good zombie players, like maybe Beast Mode or Silchus will just show up and top, like they always do. I don't know about Zombies. I think I'm pretty confident that we're going to see Frogs and Blackwings top. I think Frogs are maybe a stocks up because of the sort of dying down of the frog hate, and Blackwings are probably a stocks down because of so much fairies and Machina, and just I think people Blackwings were already kind of a stocks down because they're just sort of fading compared to the like crazy high that they had, and then also like people were just sort of figuring out how to play against them a little bit more, and now also people are bringing a lot more of these decks that hard counter them. So I mean, that being said, they are still insane, and they will still probably top. So that's where I am on the usual suspects, as I dub these three. Finally, we arrive at the unfortunate stocks down segment of the video. These are the decks that I think we are not going to be seeing as much of. Starting here with, of course, the iconic Dragon Turbo, a deck that a lot of people hate to love to hate, whatever. I'm kind of neither of those camps, but let's just talk about it. The main reason I actually think we're not going to see this is I feel like it's kind of just worse than playing the crazy Lightstorm Christia deck. Because that deck has like a similar nuts ceiling, but is a lot more consistent, just has a lot more good stuff going on. You don't need to just combo off on turn one to be able to hit your ceiling. You've got like these Hamster Raikou plays that you can do in the early stages of the game if you draw a slow hand, and it's not bad. You've got like Orange Light and Honest giving you these like sort of crazy hand trap stops for anything your opponent's going to do. So I feel like this is kind of just, this deck is just worse than that deck. If like, I mean, yeah, that's all I got to say. Like, it's just a better high roll deck than Dragon Turbo. So my advice is, if you're considering playing Dragon Turbo, like maybe try out the Christia Sworn deck. It's got a similar playstyle, but I think it's kind of just better, right? Maybe that's cap, maybe that's wrong, but I mean that's honestly where I am right now. So this is probably the most controversial part of the video, which is why I left it, of course, at the very end, where only a third of my viewers are paying attention anymore, and that's Bayou Turbo. Now this is a deck we kind of let James Arc and Lord Voldemort convince us that this was the best deck of the format, when actually, if I really think about it, Bayou Turbo just has a straight-up bad matchup against all of the three top decks that I named earlier. And it's not particularly good against like any of the breakout decks that I talked about either. So I feel like this deck is just not as good as those other top decks. I think it really struggles against frogs, and the meta is going to be frog heavier for the foreseeable future. In my opinion, I think the new technology makes frogs really, really, really strong and diversifies their playstyle a lot. And just like sitting there setting things and summoning 2300 vanillas is so goddamn bad against like Caius every turn. So I just can't think of like which matchup I would consider Bayou to be favored in. I think Pure Blackwings is just stronger. It's like not less consistent, and it also just has these crazy power plays that are better than Bayou. I think that Zombies are sort of similar in that sense, but their ceiling's just even higher than Blackwings. It's kind of just feels like this deck is like an oppression meme in a lot of senses. Like it's just a draw, oppression, or bust against a lot of matchups, especially like Zombies and Quick Draw. I feel like that's the only way you're winning those matchups. And then, I mean, Fairies aren't a particularly good matchup either. Maybe Fairies is like the best matchup for this deck, actually. Maybe this is like the anti-fairy deck of the... I don't know, though. I don't feel like it's that great. But Hamster Raikou is pretty good against the fairy deck. But in general, I think that the Bayou deck is just a lot more underwhelming than it has been presented as. I still think it's a good deck. Like, I think it's like the fourth best deck, though. You know, not the first or the second like some people claim it is. So it stocks down in that sense. But I mean, yeah, I just don't see this deck performing at the level of those other like top tier decks. I don't think it is one of those number one, number two kind of slots. I think it's kind of been diminished. All right, so that's going to about wrap it up. Those are my predictions. Glad to have put them out there. We're going to find out. Was I right? Was I wrong? Be sure to let me know in the comments. Call me an idiot if I was wrong. Call me a genius if I was right. But either way, you should definitely go over to the E3 Yu-Gi-Oh! Channel. Tune in for that Ribbit 1 live stream coverage. The streams over there are always very hype. Maybe even consider playing in the tournament. I always find these tournaments fun, even if they can be a bit nerve-wracking. You know, worst thing that could happen is you could waste a few hours of your life, scrub out, you know. Maybe give it a shot. That's all we got for today, though, so I'll see you next time. Maybe we'll be discussing the results of the tournament by then. Peace out.